let's talk about Knicks Pacers, man, because I mean, by the time you hear this, they will have played game 2, maybe, or they're gearing up for game 2. But game 1, like you said, it's the craziest game I've seen since game 2 of the Pacers series last round. But the fact they keep doing this, they were down 9 points with 55 seconds left in regulation. Aaron Nesmith has an out-of-body experience. Tyrese Halliburton pulls out the Reggie Miller choke maybe a little too early, but just all the sequence of events, if you've seen it already, you know exactly what we're talking about. It's hard for me to sum up everything that happened in enough time to keep this pod flowing and going. But that game, man, like, again, sets the tone for the series. Pacers quite literally steal game 1. But like you and I were saying, I don't know. We were texting about this, obviously, but how do you come back from losing a game like that? I have no idea. But I think that it says so much about the Pacers that they've done this 3 times in the playoffs. If it's destiny, if it's just a level of relentlessness that you see among championship teams, the depth that they have. And I think that it actually does lend itself to a lot of talking points in this actual series. But my gosh, the game itself might be the craziest thing that we see all playoffs for the next 4 or 5 years.
Is the biggest loser in the 2025 NBA playoffs win probability? Like, does win probability actually
throw it out the window?
Anymore? That's the 3rd time that they've had like less than a 5% chance to win a game per win probability. Yep. And have come back to win the game. And that's only happened. It was like 4 times in the history of the NBA, and 3 of them have been the Pacers this year. I don't understand how they do it. Even when Nesmith was going on that tear last night, like, I'm watching the TV and I'm like, damn, that's pretty crazy, but like, it doesn't mean anything. Like, this isn't going to actually mean anything. And then like, they kind of just kept chipping away. And like, even as we're going back through this game in my head, like, I still don't really understand how the Knicks blew it, because it's not like to bring back like the C series, like the Celtics just stopped scoring. They flat out stopped scoring. The Knicks were still scoring. Like, they were hitting free throws. I know they missed a couple, especially OG missed one at the end that really ended up biting them in the butt. But like, it's not like they just went like on this crazy drought where they weren't scoring any points. It was just like all of a sudden the Pacers were trading 2s for 3s and more 3s and more 3s and more 3s, and, you know, miss free throw here, and then they get a layup on it just, the game swung so fast. And then, you know, Tyrese Halliburton breaks out the choke sign. Really, really unfortunate that it ended up being a toe on the line, but it's not totally lost because they ended up
winning the game.
It would have really sucked if that moment got lost in NBA history because they ended up losing in overtime. But for them to end up winning that game in OT, and not for nothing, they started out down in that overtime. They fought back. They continued to fight back. There was 8 lead changes in a 5-minute overtime, which is not a normal number. Like, that's higher than usual. That just, at one point, Stan Van Gundy even said it on the broadcast. It's like, it felt like one of those college football games that's like, whoever has the ball last wins this game. And that's kind of how that felt. And then you have like the Obi Toppin dunk where he just like levitates in the air, like double clutch, and got fouled, but didn't get called, but double clutch in the air, like to really put the exclamation point on the game. Like, I give the Pacers a lot of credit for the way that, not just the way that they came back, but the way that they were able to recalibrate after storming on the court after what felt like one of the biggest moments in Madison Square Garden history. And being able to be like, oh, okay, all right, it was actually toe on the line. We got to like get back on the bench. We got to like settle back in, get back down to business. It would have been so easy for that. And obviously like all the pressure is on the Knicks at that point because they blew the game in the first place. But there is like a level of like, how do you get yourself to like calm down and be like, all right, we got 5 more minutes of basketball. We got to lock back in here. You know, adrenaline's pumping. Like, how do we finish the job? And they started down early and still found a way to come back. I say down early. It was like 5 points, but like, that feels like a lot. And they found a way to you know, respond and get the dub.
Not for nothing, too. The big part about that Tyrese shot. Well, one, they're down 2. He's like driving the lane. He's like, no, I'm going to dribble back out to the 3-point line like he did in Cleveland. And then it bounces up 8 feet in the air and somehow goes in. Like, again, everything that like the Mad Libs of that game, like it's starting to get to the point where like this does feel like the plot of an unrealistic sports movie that you're like, man, this doesn't happen like that. The ball's not going to bounce up in the air like that. And they're not going to, all of these things that are happening, which kind of is why I give that destiny kind of feeling. But to widen the scope or widen the lens to the entire series, I saw somebody say that there's a reason how the Pacers keep doing this. They did it against the Bucks. They did it against the Cavs. And their legs are still fresh late. Rick Carlisle, big credit and kudos to him for, again, we talked about it last week, his evolution as a head coach. But this team, in addition to the starting lineup, they're playing Obi Toppin. They're playing Ben Shepherd. They're playing TJ McConnell. They're playing Thomas Bryant, NBA champion Thomas Bryant. They're going deep into their bench, and they're keeping guys' legs fresh, whereas we know that Tom Thibodeau is not necessarily a guy who does that. And I said this about their first round series against the Pistons, and I thought the same thing in the second round against Boston, that their lack of depth or the lack of belief or usage of those depth pieces, because I don't necessarily think that the guys who come off the bench for the Knicks are bad. And they use Mitchell Robinson and Cameron Payne, and Deuce McBride had moments yesterday, but that they're relying so heavily on these guys and they're logging such heavy minutes, and they have been all year and they have been all playoffs. You see them run out of gas late. And again, there's the probability of last night happening, that you replay those events and the Pacers win that game 1 out of every 1,000 times probably. But they got that win. And now the Knicks are down 1-0 in that series. Are you overly concerned? Obviously, just removing the emotions out of it, which is impossible to do. But thinking X's and O's and just the way these teams match up, I feel like that depth and that trust in that depth is a big reason to be behind the Pacers in this series.
Yeah, that's where, last week I picked the Pacers to win the series, and that had a lot to do with it. It's the speed that they play with, and it's that Carlisle is not afraid to go deep into his bench, where Tibbs, like you said, it's at most 7, maybe 8-man rotation. Like, they use Mitchell Robinson, they use Deuce, and then after that, it's like you might get some campaign moments here. He subbed in DeLon Wright the other night for one defensive possession. They're not going very deep.
Then he called him Darrell Wright, which is funny.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, his older brother. But, that is where styles make fights. And that's an upper hand for the Pacers, especially after the comeback last night. If the Knicks had won the first game, and I fully expected the Knicks to win game 1, I would have thought that MSG was rocking the way that it was all last series. And they, the Pacers come in after what felt like a year off, but really it was just a week off.
Yeah.
And they have to, go into a raucous environment and try and steal game 1 on the road. They get down big early. It was kind of all right, this is what you expect to happen. For them to make that comeback, now all the pressure is on New York, because if you can't take game 2 at home, then you're in serious trouble going back to Indiana. And it's the exact same situation the Pacers were in the last round after stealing games 1 and 2 in Cleveland. So they've been here before. They've been in these types of moments. And you were the one that pointed out last night. It's could you imagine if they had ended up making that comeback and then ended up losing on a toe on the line after the way that the Eastern Conference Finals went for them last year, where they were in every single game, 3 out of the 4 games, and ended up getting swept. That's a moment of, it's a combination of being in this position already in the playoffs and having to come back from down big and finding a way to dig out of those holes. And all right, maybe I'm sure Carlisle's telling him all right, get it to 15 by this point, get it to 10 by this point. All right, now you're down single digits. Well, you're in the game. It's part of that, but it's also part of what they experienced last year against Boston in the conference finals, where they were in 3 of those 4 games. They came out with 0 wins, but it felt like they could have won any of those 3 games. And now you see them, convert that in this year's conference finals. It just shows, a little bit of poise, a little bit of preparedness, just experience, everything shining through. And above all, Tyrese Halliburton's that guy, man. He wants that shot. He lives for those moments. And, when the ball's in his hands in those moments, he's stepping up and knocking them down more often than not.
Yeah, I think it's now we talked about the list. I think it's 4 for 4 in under 2 minutes in the playoffs, something like that, something crazy. And then he's gone up to 12 or 14 or something like that this year, playoffs and regular season. 12 or 14. Yeah, and I think that there's the element of being young enough to not care. And he even said it last night. He's I was taking these shots, and not a lot of people were watching us because we were bad, and nobody cared if I made it or missed it. And that gave me the confidence to just go out there and not think about it. And I remember, rest in peace to a great Knicks legend, but Willis Reed used to work for the Hornets and told my dad, they forged a pretty good relationship. And he told him, man, I never was nervous about these shots because the game's already lost. All you can do is win the game. If I missed this shot, we got the same outcome that we would have had I not taken it. Right. So it's you know what, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to shoot it. And all I can do is win the game or tie the game for us. It is what it is. So thinking about that, and it's easier said than done to have the mentality, but that's why Willis Reed's a 2-time Finals MVP, and that's why Tyrese Halliburton and guys like that who are just in that mode. And when you talked about last year, I think about so much continuity. Another bench guy I didn't even name was Benedict Mathurin, who is coming off the bench, didn't get a chance to play in the playoffs for the Pacers last season. All these guys, and I think when you talked about the poise, Andrew Nembhard came to mind. because he was struggling a little bit, especially in the second half. And Carlisle didn't go with him down the stretch. He came in for one play and then went back to the bench. And I remember they went back to him in overtime, and he had some big shots in OT, hit a corner three, hit a pull up as well. And it was like, man, you were sitting on the bench like that entire comeback, and you came in for one play, but you're ready to go. And I think that, again, that speaks to the culture that they've created. That speaks to everything that's going on with the Pacers team and the confidence that they've built and they've gained. And this kind of, it's Tyrese Halliburton, when you know your team is behind you and they believe in you and they trust you to take that shot, and they're not going to call you out or call you crazy for going out there and trying to shoot it from beyond the arc, even though he had a toe on the line, it helps the confidence so much.
Yeah, he talked about it on Scott Van Pelt after the game. I don't know if you heard his reasoning behind that, but he was basically saying that he had a lane to the rim and he wanted to get to his floater, but as he tried to get to his floater, Mikal Bridges knocked the ball loose, which I know some people were saying like, oh, was that a double dribble? Like he got the ball knocked loose. So by the time that he regathered his dribble, they had already made the switch. So Mikal Bridges was out guarding whoever had set the screen. It was probably Miles Turner, I think, pick and popped. And he had Mitchell Robinson on him. So he was like, so then I turned around to try and get into isolation. By the time that he got to the 3-point line, he realized he had less time left than he thought he had.
Yeah.
So
you can see him look at the clock on the other end of the court. And he's like, oh, snap, I got to turn around and shoot it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So basically the way that he described it was that the game plan was to get downhill, either try and draw a foul, but when he got a more clear lane than he thought he would, he was going to go to that floater. But when Mikal knocked it loose, he had to kind of improvise on the fly. And then, got the matchup that he wanted, but wasn't able to attack. So he was like, I just got to put it up. And even though the ball, he said it too. He was like, the ball felt like it was hanging up there forever. But he did also mention that, and anybody that's played basketball knows that feeling. He's like, when I let it go, it felt like it was good. So like, even when it hit the rim, he felt like it was going to drop. And surely enough, it dropped. And again, them winning that game, that turns it into just an all-time playoff moment and an instant classic.
Yeah, all-time playoff moment, instant classic. Set the tone for this series. And again, we know that by the time we record again next week, we'll be 4 or 5 games into the series, and it could go either way, but that certainly set the tone for it. So I'm excited to see how that series goes, and we'll throw it to a quick break after that. I will say real quick, we mentioned 2 champions in this series, well, 3 because PJ Tucker, but 2 of them also college teammates, OG Anunoby and Thomas Bryant. Their first loss of their college career came in Maui to Wake Forest. So just throwing your fun trivia fact out. They were ranked 13th in the country.
Had to get it in there.
Yeah, had to get that in there. Of course. So thanks for checking out NBA Sound System Canada on YouTube. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe below and find us wherever you get your podcasts. And on Instagram, we have weekly episodes and bonus content throughout the week.